Hello and welcome back to the session 1 of day 3 of your university course in UAP, or as it's also known, the 2013 Citizen Hearing on UAP. In this session, you're going to hear from Peter Robbins, Gary Heseltine, Linda Moulton-Howe, all legendary researchers in the field, but also from Peter Davenport, who was the head of the National UFO Reporting Center. His successor has just been interviewed by Jimmy on the UAP files, and he's got a really good database of cases. And what they're discussing in this session is the associated phenomena along with UAP. So some of the high strangeness, some of the weird effects it can cause, and not just I saw a light in the sky, I saw a silver craft. It's all part of the investigation. So I'm not going to waste too much time on this one. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you for the next session.
Please stand. And the affirmation.
If you will, repeat after me. I do hereby affirm that I will tell the truth and nothing but the truth to this committee today. Thank you.
Mr. Davenport, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen on the committee. My name is Peter B. Davenport. I'm the director of the National UFO Reporting Center, which has been located in the state of Washington since October of 1974. I'm delighted to be here and to especially have an opportunity to present data to the committee that I think is of special value to not just every member of mankind on this planet, but in point of fact, every living organism on this planet. And what I'd like to do, Mr. Speaker, if the chair doesn't, or Mr. Chairman, if the chair doesn't object, is split my presentation into 3 brief parts. First of all, I'd like to present a little bit of material on my background. Then I would like to discuss the National UFO Reporting Center and what it is. I'm probably introducing it to many members of the committee for the first time. And then I'm going to take an opportunity to walk the committee through a number of the roughly 86,000 reports that are in our database that I've collected over the last 19 years.
Please. That's fine.
What I'd like to do is the only text that I'm going to read is the first paragraph of my position statement on the issue of UFOs, a copy of which should be in the packet of 10 pages of material that I've submitted to committee members. And that first paragraph very simply is, the question of whether human beings are alone in the universe is the most important scientific question that has ever confronted mankind. And that is the issue that we are addressing today. A bit of my background, and I think it's important because when a person is a ufologist, there's always the question of mental balance. At least this is what I'm told by people who look at my data and look at how I collect that data. So just a few brief comments. I've worked in both the public and the private sector, have a very good education, and I think the committee has a 1-page biographical statement on my background. Have an educational background in biochemistry and genetics, international business. I am a former Russian translator for the US government in the Soviet Union. In June of 1979, I qualified as an escort interpreter for the US Department of State. I've spent many years teaching at the university level. I'm a businessman, former founding president of a successful biotech firm in Seattle. So I'm probably not construed to be, or cannot be construed to be, some kind of unusual, quirky person. And I speak within that context. It's important to create the context so you can understand what I'm discussing this morning. Let me move to the second phase of what I'd like to present, and that is the National UFO Reporting Center. founded, as I mentioned earlier, in October 1974 by my predecessor as director in that capacity. His name is Robert J. Gribble, a retired Seattle fireman who had a lifelong interest in the subject of UFOs. And in July of 1994, he turned over the reins to me. And I think I can honestly report to the committee that it's changed my life and changed my outlook on what reality may be. The UFO Reporting Center has a hotline, rings 24 hours a day. We also have a website, ufocenter.com, where over the course of the last 19 years, I've accumulated approximately 86,000 written reports. I estimate that that represents roughly 1/3 of the reports that have been submitted to our center. What I would like to do, and my gratitude to Congressman Bartlett, he gave me a wonderful opportunity yesterday when he made his, I think, commendable statement alluding to the press and the perceived lassitude there and how they behave with regard to the issue of ufology. What I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, with the remainder of my time is walk through a 6-page document that I've submitted to the committee and respond to the question that Mr. Bartlett posed, certainly rhetorically and perhaps tacitly yesterday: where is the press? Where are all the reports? And my hope is in about 7 or 8 minutes, the committee will understand a little bit better the reality, the apparent reality that we are dealing with in addressing the issue of UFOs. If the committee could please turn to page 1 of the document listing a number of reports. Out of deference to the chair, I would like to start with a report from the state of Alaska from the year 1936. And this goes back to a question that Congressman Cook posed, I believe in the late morning of Monday of this week. He said, where are all the reports from past years? And I'd like to address that. Eklutna, Alaska.
Yeah, that's it.
October 1936, 2 teenage boys working in that city of Alaska, at that time no doubt a small city, were employees of the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, building a camp there. They decided to hitchhike into Anchorage, Alaska. As they were walking towards Anchorage, hoping to get a ride into that city, they encountered an object that looked roughly something like a flat iron. Mr. Holger Berg, one of those teenagers, reported to me in September of year 2000. They were walking towards Anchorage. They noticed a light coming directly at them. They were relieved because it was cold in October of that year, and they thought it was a truck with only one headlight. Lo and behold, it turned out allegedly to be something else. It was a triangular craft that passed right overhead, scared them so badly that they dove into a snowbank to get away from it. Next case, McMinnville, Tennessee. Questions have been posed before this committee, and the committee has commented, do UFOs ever crash? Do they have malfunctions? On the 7th of January, 1995, precisely that seems to have occurred over the city of McMinnville, Tennessee. A fleet of objects seen descending over the airport in McMinnville for several minutes. One of them appears to have blown up. Tonight, during my longer presentation at 9 p.m., I will show the 5-page handwritten document prepared by an investigating officer of what happened there. If the committee would please turn to page 2, I'd like to, for a moment, address the issue of the Phoenix Lights case. Quite a celebrated case, probably the most dramatic UFO event that has occurred in the history of ufology since 1947. Just briefly, the 5 objects that loitered over the city of Phoenix for upwards of 2 hours were not less than 7 miles in diameter. I will present evidence tonight showing why we believe that is the case and how we calculated the size of them. Next case, Longview, Washington. An elk, an adult female elk, lifted out of the forest of the state of Washington before 14 witnesses at about 1 minute before noon. We have reported that. I've had witnesses on multiple radio programs talking about that. about that case. Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, October 26, 1999. 2 airline pilots over the Dallas-Fort Worth area were shocked to see a large disc approaching their aircraft. It suddenly turned, it executed, they estimated, a 120-degree turn in under 1 second. It streaked away from them to the east. We have the audio tape from the FAA through a Freedom of Information Act request. If the committee would please turn to page 3. About 2/3 of the way down that page, Challis, Idaho, September 27th, year 2000, 21:30 hours Mountain Time. 4 hunters were in a remote hunting camp near Challis, Idaho, about an hour-and-a-half drive outside that city. One of the men exited the trailer that they were in to secure food for dinner that night. He was shocked by what he saw hovering above their camp, a triangular craft, dark. His flashlight, as he jumped up on the back end of his pickup truck, swept across the sky. What he saw above him shocked him so badly that he fell to his knees and started yelling. 3 of the others in the trailer came out, and they observed the object suddenly, slowly move off, go up the side of a nearby mountain range, go over the top of it. A very dramatic case, and if the committee would like documentation of that case, I would call upon Mrs. Howe at the end of the table, who was present at the testimony of 2 of those witnesses. She later brought them to a radio program. Next case I would like to address briefly is that of Carteret, New Jersey, on the top of page 4. Very dramatic case in which certainly dozens, possibly hundreds of cars were parked on the New Jersey Turnpike in response to a cluster of yellow objects that were hovering above that turnpike. Just seconds earlier, they had been reported from Fort Dix, New Jersey, to be streaking across that military facility. Within seconds, they were probably 70 or 80 miles to the east, and it was reported by many hundreds of people. Moving down further on page 4, the location, Andrews Air Force Base, Waldorf, Maryland. Mr. Richard Dolan first alluded to this case on the morning of Monday this week. A blue object, there's an error in this citation. I think Mr. Dolan reported it accurately, however. A blue object seen streaking over Waldorf, Maryland on that date, July 26th, year 2002, being pursued by 2 F-16 fighters. Minutes later, it was seen returning the opposite direction, also pursued by those same fighters. A very, very interesting case. The case below it, Meriwether County, Georgia, April 13th, 2003. 3 people driving in a closed vehicle. The driver was shocked to see a cluster of red objects pursuing his vehicle. Suddenly, those tiny objects, perhaps the size of golf balls, reportedly were inside his vehicle. They stayed in the vehicle for an estimated 20 to 30 seconds. Suddenly, all of them coalesced around one of the occupants of the vehicle, the older brother of the 2 brothers. This gentleman had tragically, intestinal surgery just a few days earlier, had a colostomy. All of the objects in the car assembled around the surgical scar on the lower abdomen of this gentleman. Within seconds, they suddenly streaked off, interestingly, through the closed windows of the vehicle. I've had 3 of those people, those 3 witnesses, on an international radio program talking about their experience. If the committee could please turn to page 5. Seattle, Washington, June 20th, 2004. An adult male standing outside in the University District of Seattle was shocked to see a triangular craft suddenly streak across the cloudless blue sky. Very, very dramatic sighting. Others reported it to the National UFO Reporting Center. That case has been on our website for the last 13 years. Going down to a case at the bottom of page 5, the O'Hare Airport case of November 7th, 2006. Mr. Dolan, Richard Dolan, alluded to this case earlier in the week's testimony. A very, very dramatic case. A disc estimated to be some 30 to 40 feet in diameter, hovering above gate C-17 at O'Hare Airport, seen for perhaps as long as 10 minutes or even longer. I cite the case because of the drama surrounding it. That object was in what used to be called terminal control airspace, now called Class B airspace. Nothing should have been there over that airport. And it was suddenly seen to accelerate, as Mr. Dolan reported earlier in the week. It punched through 2 layers of solid overcast, leaving holes in the overcast. A very interesting and dramatic case, reported on national news, interestingly. Turning to the last page, if we could please, page 6. Chicago, Illinois, November 4th, year 2008. I will be presenting evidence on this case to include photographs of the very peculiar damage that a young woman's car sustained. We cannot demonstrate clearly or to everybody's satisfaction that the case is UFO related, but I will present the evidence tonight during my presentation at 9 p.m. Very, very interesting case of the mutilation of a car. I will leave it at that until I'm able to show the photographs. I'd like to close by citing a number of interesting cases that have been submitted to our center over the last roughly 10 months. We all are questing to know what all of this means and what's going on. The phenomenon appears to be very real. But in June of last year, 2012, the National UFO Reporting Center began receiving reports that I certainly do not understand. I don't believe anybody does. But the second week of June last year, and all of this information can be seen on the website, ufocenter.com, we started receiving reports, credible reports from credible witnesses of clusters of red, orange, yellow, amber, or gold lights, up to 150 in a cluster from around the world. I've written several articles. We have several statements on our homepage about this phenomenon. It's very interesting, and in my opinion, it may represent the fact that we may have rounded the corner, so to speak, in the field of ufology when it comes to the dramatic nature of many of the reports that are coming to us. What the cause of these sightings is, we have no idea. But we have roughly 2,000 to 3,000 of these sightings posted to our website. If members of the committee would like to see details, I would commend to their attention the roughly 38 cases that were submitted to our facility on Saturday night, the 10th of November, year 2012. One of those cases on page 6 of your handout is that of Castle Rock. I cite that case because it was a report that was submitted to our center by a commercial airline pilot, retired, 37 years of experience. Driving east from Interstate 5, this is about 70 miles north of the city of Portland, driving east on Highway 504, what he saw frightened him so badly that he stopped his car on the highway, turned it around, and went back the other direction to get his camera and his wife. It's a very, very dramatic case. Again, one of roughly 38 cases. An hour and 12 minutes later, a retired United States Marine Corps officer and his wife encountered something very similar in the city of Los Angeles. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen, the question has been posed, is the UFO phenomenon real? And I pose to you the question that if it is not real, why have all of these reports been submitted over the last roughly 19 years? The UFO phenomenon appears to be very real. And I would like to conclude in responding to the very prescient question that Congressman Bartlett posed yesterday at about 3:05 p.m., where is the press and where are all of the reports? Very good question, and it's a question that every serious-minded UFO investigator poses it to himself probably multiple times a day. I'd like to address the issue of the press. Many people have asked the question, why is the press responding apparently so strangely to this phenomenon? And from my vantage point, it's really a little bit different than that. I would split the press into two categories at least: the local, regional press and the national press. From my observation, and I've had hundreds of exchanges of information with members of the press, the interesting phenomenon is members of the local or regional press are questing for this data. A week doesn't go by when I don't get 3 to 5 queries from members of the local press, smaller newspapers, radio and television stations. But interestingly, when one gets to the national level, the interest seems to simply expire. A very peculiar phenomenon, but it tells us that people who are professional writers, who are professional reporters, are very interested in this phenomenon. And I close with a brief comment about the government's apparent position on this phenomenon. The government knows about this phenomenon. There is no doubt about it. I've had multiple exchanges, multiple conversations with all sorts of people who are in positions of authority in federal, state, and local government. Many of them admit that they accept the fact that this is potentially a very real phenomenon. I've talked to military officers, and senior officers, general or flagship officers, flag officers, who in quiet conversations have admitted to me that they are very interested in this phenomenon, and in their opinion, there is very real evidence in support of what this committee is addressing in these hearings this week. It appears that we are being visited on a frequent basis. The evidence supports it strongly, in my opinion. And with that, I will close. I think my time has expired.
Exactly. Thank you very much. It has expired.
Thank you.
I want to underscore a different style from my personal point of view. I do not intend to interrupt any of the speakers. You're aware of the time, and when it goes over, and your testimony is very good, it'll continue. However, you have to self-discipline yourself. And in case you have problems with that, you just look at me, and when I'm doing it like that, that means wind it up intelligently so that you look good. And I want to commend you, Mr. Davenport. You have a great political style, and that is when you're going over, you repeat that you're going to close in about 3 or 4 times.
I do apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I should
okay.
have noticed the time card, and I was so focused on...
No, you stay focused. Stay focused on your message. We'll worry about the time. But we appreciate your testimony. Mr. Robbins, the floor is yours, and we'll allow you the same latitude. But keep in mind that when we're biting into time, we're biting into our time to question you and to have a discourse that may be more germane to our particular interest. So discipline yourself. And Mr. Robbins, please go forward, and I won't interrupt you.
I'll keep that in mind, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of our committee. I was only scheduled here to do this yesterday afternoon, so my opening statement is a bit rough at the edges. I've been involved in the field of UFO studies for more than 30 years. As a researcher, lecturer, activist, consultant, author, and conference organizer. I've consulted to numerous television and radio shows, films, appear on radio regularly commenting about these subjects, write a column, actually a new one that will be starting in June for a new online magazine called UFO Truth, published by my friend and colleague to my right, Gary Heseltine. I'm Also, the co-author of a 540-page book that was a bestseller in the United Kingdom entitled Left at East Gate, a first-hand account of the Rendlesham Forest UFO investigation, Rendlesham Forest UFO incident, its cover-up and investigation. For these 30 years that I have pursued this subject, I have done it on a number of fronts, always doing my utmost to approach each new case, witness claim, research paper, or interview free of prejudice or agenda. My only objective being to get myself and my readers as close as possible to the truth of what I've been looking into, limited only by my investigative skills, means, and applying as much common sense as possible wherever possible. Before proceeding, however, I feel I should put on the record that I am self-trained as an investigative writer. And if anyone in these hearings has a background more opposite than my friend and colleague Peter Davenport, it's me. I began my professional life as a painter and film historian. I taught painting in New York City for many years at my alma mater, the School of Visual Arts. And as I developed as a writer, I supported myself continuing as an artist, as a manager of a distinguished repertory theater company in New York City, as a New York City tour guide, and as a copywriter. I also worked for 8 of those years as an online phone volunteer and shift supervisor on the busiest crisis intervention and suicide hotline in the United States. Some may feel that such an eclectic and decidedly unrelated background may not be much of an asset in the field I ultimately choose to pursue. I can only beg to differ. Subjects I've chosen to investigate have included, but not been limited to, the origins of the UFO ridicule factor, roadblocks on the path to disclosure, the United Kingdom's Rendlesham Forest incident, the strange death of James Vincent Forrestal, first Secretary of Defense, as some of you know, and an early casualty of UFO secrecy. At least that are my conclusions. Critical thinking, deductive reasoning and ufology, stress and UFO studies, the UFO abduction phenomena, and UFOs, organized religion, and fundamentalist thinking. As this morning's discussion topic is listed as various topics, I believe I qualify. While I stand ready to try and answer any questions to the best of my ability this committee may have, I'd particularly like to invite you to focus in on 2 of these particular areas of study. One, the so-called UFO ridicule factor. We now know for a fact the subject of UFOs and their implications have been regarded as extremely serious by our military and intelligence communities from at least the summer of 1947 on. More seriously, in fact, than any other matter facing this nation since the end of World War II. Why then have the overwhelming majority, and Mr. Davenport hit the nail on the head, we divide the media's general relationship with the subject of UFOs into 2 areas. Local and regional news gatherers are overall very serious, inquisitive, and genuinely respectful of this mystery. Major media has singled this subject out for a level of ridicule, sarcasm, and condescension matched in post-war journalism. How and why did all of this come to pass? And what is its legacy for the American people? The second subject is one you were introduced to during yesterday morning's hearings. That is the UK's Rendlesham Forest UFO incident. I first heard of these events in the autumn of 1983, shortly after the story broke in Great Britain. The following year, I met and chatted briefly with Larry Warren, the former United States Air Force security police officer who had, completely on his own, and to a degree at great risk, certainly to his peace of mind and character, become the whistleblower in this case, was directly responsible for the FOIA that resulted in the release of Colonel Halt's January 1981 report, which was then published in England in '83, and the story broke. 4 years later, we met again at a conference not far from here at American University in Washington. I was very impressed with his presentation. Fully authentic military witnesses who can be fully vetted and prove their involvement are not all that common. You've had the privilege of hearing several of them yesterday afternoon. I decided I wanted to interview this guy. He decided, after hearing me on a panel discussion, he wanted me to co-author a book with him. We met the next weekend, we talked all weekend, and by that Sunday afternoon we shook hands, and I was very excited. I was going to be writing a book. I was looking for a serious project to get my teeth into. I thought it might take a year or two, obviously result in a huge bestseller, a movie deal, many checks to endorse, and women to fight off. Life does not always work out the way you think. The book took 10 years to complete. It cost us everything we had. It cost me, to a great degree, my peace of mind. It's brought me back to England since more than 20 times. I had no idea what I was getting into. But when we completed it, it was a bestseller in the United Kingdom. It was immediately in the library of the then new Prime Minister Tony Blair. One of our greatest champions in the United Kingdom became former Admiral of the Fleet, former Chief of Staff of the Ministry of Defense, Lord Peter Hill-Norton, who as an MP brought his hardcover copy onto the book of the floor of House of Lords and confronted the then Secretary for Defense with 4 questions taken right out of the book, all of which were demurred. When my co-author lost his passport, the State Department refusing to renew it for quote-unquote speaking out on sensitive defense issues in a public forum on foreign soil, it was nobody less than former Attorney General Ramsey Clark who pro bono helped us restore Larry's passport and continue our work. The men who were involved in this as witnesses, and it was only touched on yesterday, were put through absolute hell. Some of the things that were done to them were unconscionable as far as I'm concerned. And this is of more interest and focus for me than whatever the source of the intelligence is behind the events of December 1980. I applaud John and Jim for fighting for the truth to come out about this. I think all of these men are still struggling. And in fact, we are all clear in former Deputy Base Commanders Charles Halt's terminology that these men were meddled with, and in some cases are still sorting out implanted memories from actual ones. Hence comes a certain amount of contention within this case that continues 33 years after. I hope I can clarify some of it fast, and again, thank you for the privilege of appearing before you.
Your timing is excellent, Mr. Robbins. Next witness is Gary Heseltine.
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 Thank you. Good morning, and I will not go over 10 minutes. I practice. Right, my name is Gary Heseltine, and I am a recently retired police detective in England, having served almost 24 years with the British Transport Police. For the majority of that time, for 20 years, I was a detective. I was dealing at the sharp end of evidential matters. I've been involved in murder, manslaughter, rape, etc., etc. I come to this subject on an evidential basis, and I think that is very necessary in this field. I am here principally to speak on behalf of police officers worldwide who have witnessed UFOs, but I would also like to say that I'm also one of the principal investigators of the Rendlesham Forest incident that my colleague Peter has alluded to, along with Linda Moulton-Howe. I would consider as the 3 principal investigators of this incident. We're all doing very good work on it. For the last 5 years, I have worked with Colonel Charles Holt, the man who wrote the Holt Memorandum, the Deputy Base Commander of what was absolutely a nuclear facility. And let me back that up by saying that for 3 years of my 6 years in the Royal Air Force, between 1983 and 1989, I served on 2 nuclear bases doing exactly the same job as what those US Air Force policemen did. And the base at Bentwater is identical to the base at Aarau in West Germany where I worked. So let's cut the crap. This is a nuclear issue. Right. In January 2002, moving to my police background, I created the Police Reporting UFO Sightings Database. It's commonly referred to as the Proof Force Police Database. You have an information pack with that information. It's basically there for UK police officers to record on and off-duty police sightings. Believe me, over the 11 years of my research, nothing will surprise me what anybody says in this field about what they report. It is truly extraordinary. When I began my research 11 years ago into British police officers, there were approximately 6 cases involving 10 officers. 11 years later, I now have over 425 cases involving over 940 British police officers. This is a significant amount, in my opinion. These sightings have taken place the length and breadth of Britain and have been reported at all times of the day. Whilst I'm not a big lover of statistics because they can be manipulated, I would say that the key statistic for me is that over 70% of these cases are multiple witness officer cases. Therefore, it is significant corroboration to a sighting event. Again, I look at this case through evidential eyes. In one particular case, there is in excess of 24 police officers that were involved in tracking at least one object over 6 counties of Britain on the night of March the 30th, 31st, 1993. This is referred to as the Cosford incident. Many police officers have observed structured craft of huge size and proportions in close proximity to their ground positions. These craft range in shape and size and dimensions from many tens of feet to many hundreds of feet in size. Many of the police cases on the database, in my opinion, are truly extraordinary. For example, in October 1984, near RAF Northolt in Middlesex, a silent black triangular object was seen at low altitude by 2 uniformed police officers on mobile patrol, which they described as being the size of 3 football fields. When I sought to clarify this description of size, they said when they saw it, it was above 3 football fields. So I think that's a pretty good representation of size. This report was made by Police Constable Robin Perry of the Metropolitan Police. On another occasion, in October 1978, 3 uniformed police officers in a rural area of Buckinghamshire observed a huge object, which they described as a size of a football field, which suddenly and silently materialized in front of them in the blink of an eye and at relative close proximity to their position. However, there were also a number of smaller objects flying around the large main object, akin to a mothership kind of scenario, and the larger object then projected a beam down to the ground, which was the width of the football field, which then traversed the ground as if scanning the terrain for several minutes. They watched for this event for approximately 5 minutes before suddenly it went off and dematerialized in the blink of an eye. 1 second it was there, and then it was gone. And this has been described as like switching on a light bulb on and off. Not something that I think our stealth capability is quite capable of yet. The source of that report is the Police Constable Eric Raymond, retired of the Thames Valley Police. Many officers have seen objects that appear to move in ways that seem to defy laws of known physics and aerodynamics. For example, in May 1981 and 1982, 2 firearms officers were involved in the close protection of what was then a very prominent Conservative minister in a rural location in North Yorkshire. At approximately 5:30 hours in the morning, as they were walking in the grounds of this residence, they suddenly became aware that the sunshine had darkened, the sky had darkened. When they looked up to establish the cause of that, they were amazed to see a huge, dark, purple cylindrical object with a pronounced undercarriage underneath it that was described as being the length of a football field, a common figure in all of this, and hovering silently above the house at an altitude of only 200 to 300 feet, which is extremely close. The object remained motionless, silent, above the house for 5 to 10 minutes before it suddenly and silently accelerated in the blink of an eye out to the horizon, where it stopped in an instant for a few seconds and then disappeared towards the horizon and out of sight. The source of this report is Police Sergeant retired John Pawson of the North Yorkshire Police. In my introduction, I mentioned that I would refer to police officer sightings worldwide, and in the time permitted, I would like to draw your attention to just 2 particular countries where numerous police officer sightings have taken place. Namely, I refer to the United States and Belgium. Many of the US cases are simply outstanding, and I will highlight just 2 of them. Just after midnight on the 14th of December 1994, 15 police officers of Trumbull County, Ohio, observed multiple circular UFOs from different geographical positions. In one particular sighting, the engine of the police vehicle driven by Sergeant Toby Malaro suddenly cut out. When he got out of the vehicle, he looked up and a UFO was directly above him, shining a beam down. As soon as the object moved away, his engine restarted and he attempted a short pursuit. On the 5th of January 2000 in Illinois, multiple police officers observed a large triangular craft that was witnessed from many geographical positions and was sometimes seen at close proximity to their ground locations. Broadly speaking, all the officers involved in both of these incidents described craft that moved in silence, which were able to make incredibly high-speed maneuvers, unlike that of any known aircraft. Finally, in the skies above Belgium between 1989 and 1991, hundreds of police officers observed large triangular objects all over the country. Many of these sightings involved multiple police officer witnesses and were frequently seen at close proximity to their ground locations. In addition, many of these sightings were confirmed on multiple civilian radar and multiple military radar facilities. In the allotted 10 minutes given to brief you, which I'm trying to keep to, I would like to say on behalf of police officers worldwide that they are seeing actual structured craft, physical in nature, and which move in ways that they have never seen before or since. In closing, I urge this panel to accept their collective testimonies as genuine and that they offer compelling circumstantial evidence that many of these sightings represent extraordinary, unknown, structured craft moving in the Earth's airspace. In closing, and on a personal note, I believe that the time is now to lift the veil of secrecy that has shrouded this subject for over 60 years, and the subject of UFOs should now be openly accepted in the mainstream media as being real in nature, and which in turn would allow people to come forward from all walks, all lives, all countries, without the fear of ridicule and a risk to their careers. As a police detective of many years' service, I believe that the collective testimonial, documentary, and physical evidence obtained in over 60 years of UFO research overwhelmingly confirms that some, and I repeat the word some, UFO sightings do represent an ongoing extraterrestrial engagement with planet Earth. I am deeply honoured to be here before you today. And thank you, the panel, for being courageous in coming forward at probably some cost to yourselves in your reputation. But you are, and whether the mainstream media are here or not, this is historic. And it will be looked back as an historic event. And you will be congratulated in time for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, investigative detective. I just want to underscore that your passion really underscores the significance of your testimony, and that's a worthy, it's a virtue. Now we come to our last panelist for this round, who's graced us with her. She doesn't have her little hat today, but
it's not raining.
It's not okay.
It's not raining.
Very good. Well, great to have you back, Ms. Hall. Please.
Because I'm going to talk about a subject that is perhaps one of the most difficult when it comes to the UFO phenomena, I thought I would give you a little bit more context about my background. And to Jennifer, who is handling the slides, please wait until I call for them by number. My name is Linda Moulton-Howe. My master's degree in communication is from Stanford University, Palo Alto, California, in 1968. I attached a bio for you to my statement today. Since then, I have produced 24 TV documentaries, including the regional Emmy Award-honored A Strange Harvest about the worldwide animal mutilation phenomena, and more than 100 live TV studio programs. Science, environment, and medicine is my beat. I also produce, write, edit, and report the journalism award-winning Science, Environment, and Real X-Files news website, earthfiles.com. In addition, I am an investigative reporter for Premier Radio Network's program Coast to Coast AM, reporting Earth Files, Environment, Science, and Real X-Files news monthly in 3-hour broadcasts. Since 1990, I have produced 1,000 news segments for radio broadcasts. My 4 books include An Alien Harvest, 1989, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, Facts and Eyewitnesses, 1993, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, 1998, Mysterious Lights and Crop Circle, 2nd edition, 2002. I have been asked to speak around the world as an investigative reporter at national and international conferences and symposiums, including NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. And one of the subjects that I have been asked to talk about is all of the work that I have done in the investigation of animal mutilations around the world. The first global media report about this phenomena was in September of 1967, when a female horse named Lady was found dead on a ranch near Alamosa in southern Colorado. The horse's entire skull and long neck had been stripped of flesh, and every organ in the chest of that horse had been surgically excised according to a medical doctor. There was no blood anywhere, not in the animal, not around the animal, and nowhere nearby. And there were no tracks of the animal. It was powdery soil, and the animal is lying there stripped of flesh, but there were no tracks around the body, not even the own horse's tracks. But 100 and some feet away, there were horse tracks in a circle, as if the horse had been caught in something in which the feet had gone around in a circle, and then 100 and some feet away, the body was found. At that same time, and Jennifer, image 00, on July 15th, 1984, the Sunday Times in Australia headline, quote, "Cover-up alleged over UFO-linked animal slaughter. Many reports of UFOs and strange lights in the sky," close quote. Farmers in the Adelaide Hills have discovered mutilated animal corpses and burn marks on the ground. In one incident, researchers say a farmer discovered 4 cows with holes drilled into their skulls and the brains removed. Adelaide UFO researcher Colin Norris said, quote, "I have been told the Army asked the farmer to remain quiet about the animals and that the Army would cover the whole thing up," close quote. Mr. Norris said pod marks in the ground and burnt treetops indicated a UFO craft had landed. That was Australia in 1984, and we should have up that headline at 00. Yes. And Australia has played a very interesting role in this historically, because the BBC in 1979, when I started the work on A Strange Harvest, there was a producer there who told me that they had a journal from 1911 that had been published about 104 sheep being found in an Australian billabong with a ear, eye, tongue, genitals, and rectum cored out. 104 all in one billabong with no blood and no tracks around those animals either. Image 13. This map shows geographic areas where animal mutilations have been reported since 1967 at least, barring the fact that Australia has reported many before. By 2013, every state in the United States and every province in Canada have had bloodless, large animal mutilations, as well as other countries. No one knows for certain how many animals have been mutilated over the past half century in the United States and Canada and around the world. Many mutilated animals are not reported because ranchers are either afraid or do not want public attention and potential ridicule. Image 14. Beyond the United States and Canada, mutilated animals have been reported in Mexico, Panama, Puerto Rico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, parts of Europe, the Canary Islands, China, and Australia. Image 1. Excisions are not only smooth and bloodless, they can be serrated the way that pinking shears cut cloth for dressmakers, as was discovered in this 2-year-old Hereford steer, the 5th mutilation on the Richard Fazio Ranch near Portland, Oregon, within a 4-month period ending in October of 1990. Image 2. Here is a photograph of the uniformly serrated edge of the mutilator's bloodless excision that many people who have had these in their hands in the field say do look like some kind of pinking shears have cut the steer's tissue. Image 3. Here is a close-up of that particular serrated edge from the side in the 1990 Oregon steer serrated excision that an Oregon State University veterinary diagnostic laboratory reported had been cut with high heat, image 5, consistent, and I'm reading now from the Oregon State University veterinary laboratory assessment, quote, consistent with a specimen collected via electrosurgical excision, it is not possible to tell whether this lesion was caused by a laser. It does appear consistent with a heat-induced injury, close quote. Image 4. Here is another similar serrated edge found on a mutilated cow in 1975, we're going back almost 20 years, by the Cascade County Sheriff's Office in Great Falls, Montana. The issue of lasers came up early in the animal mutilation mystery because there was no blood. There had to have been some kind of cautery. But then I worked with John Altschuler, MD, pathologist and hematologist in Denver, Colorado, going out to animal mutilation sites myself to collect tissue and fluid for him to study from the animals. One of his first confirmations was cooked hemoglobin in a mutilated cow. Slide 6. Here is what normal cow collagen looks like under a microscope, image 7. And here is mutilated cow tissue in which the hemoglobin has been cooked by high heat at the excision site. Dr. Altschuler also showed me photomicrographs of the mutilator's excision in comparison with known laser surgery. Dr. Altschuler said, quote, the animal mutilation excisions do not show any carbon, but Earth life is carbon-based and all tissue exposed to the heat of a laser should show carbon residue that looks like black pepper grains under a microscope, quote, unquote. We never found any carbon residue on mutilator excisions we studied, raising the question, what is the surgical instrument? Does it work by sound frequencies or some other technology unknown to Earth medical science? Image 8. Here is a classic example of the bloodless removal of an udder from a cow that had just given birth in Ashdown, Arkansas, discovered on the morning of March 11, 1989. And I'm showing you, letting you know, this is one of the cleanest kind of phenomena. The excision is there, and the animal is not alive, but you can see how pristine the scenes are. The editor of the Little River News, Jim Williamson, contacted me, and I called Dr. Altschuler, who wanted Jim Williamson to cut a rectangle of cowhide that would include the mutilator's cut. Dr. Altschuler said tissue slides from this cow, quote, prove that the cutting was done quickly with a hot instrument of some kind, close quote. He reported, quote, examination of the tissues after fixation revealed cut edges to be very hard, difficult to cut, and appearing somewhat darker than the surrounding tissues, which does relate to high heat. Image 9. Photomicrograph number 1 has an arrow which points to the separation line. The abnormal tissue on the left shows a smudged pink change with nuclear fragmentation, indicating tissue destruction and death. These changes are referred to as coagulative necrosis. The band between cutting margin and normal tissue is quite thin, suggesting that the dissection was done with what appears to be a pinpoint accuracy and minimal dissipation of heat at the cut line, close quote. The heat is confined to a millimeter in these excisions. Image 10. This photomicrograph shows dark pinkish blue parallel bundles of cells at the cut edge of the tissue. These changes are referred to as the string bean sign by a pathologist, indicating tissue exposure to high heat, as in laser or hot needle surgery, but again, there is no carbon residue. Image 11. In this photomicrograph, the tissue is from below the hide surface and is called dermis. The upper portion clearly shows many spaces called vacuolar changes where the arrow is, which result from tissue cooking or exposure to high temperatures, probably above 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Image 12. In the lower left-hand corner of this photomicrograph is a distinct color change from a light normal pink to a dark pink. The darker collagen tissue is damaged from some injury source, but shows a striking lack of inflammatory change. This suggests that the procedure of injury was relatively fast. Taking all the microscopic findings into account, one would have to conclude that the surgical procedure performed on these animals took place quickly, probably in a minute or two, and utilized high temperature heat as a cutting source applied in a fine probe or cutting instrument, close quote. And we are talking about the excision of an ear, eye, jaw flesh, tongue, the sexual organs, and the rectum in less than 2 minutes, leaving physical evidence that has been repeated. Myself, I have cut tissue from at least 30 of these animals in pastures all over the United States, and all of the findings are exactly the same. How do you excise large sections of tissue and leave the evidence of high heat without carbon residue, no blood and no tracks around the animals, and do it in 2 minutes or less? Lynn Lauber, head of animal mutilation investigations at the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Calgary, Alberta, in 1980, where the local Canadian media were told by the RCMP that the cause of the mutilations there, in the hundreds, were satanic cults. But Lynn Lauber called me at KMGH-TV in Denver after the broadcast of my TV documentary, A Strange Harvest, and he said that he had seen my documentary, and he was calling me because, and this is what he said to me, he knew that something from outer space was involved in the mutilations that the RCMP in Canada had investigated. When I asked him, why then have you told the media the perpetrators are satanic cults? He said, the reason was that he felt the truth was too difficult to report publicly. And that, to me, sums up the metaphor of not just this 21st century or the 20th century, but this is a phenomena that I understand has been going on for thousands of years, and we are just catching up to it. And when Sheriff Tex Graves, in September of 1979, in my very first interview with somebody in law enforcement about animal mutilations when I began doing A Strange Harvest, told me, Linda, the perpetrators are creatures from outer space, quote unquote. And I felt the same shock that perhaps you do. The truth is, law enforcement has long known from their own eyewitness accounts, they've seen the beams of light in pastures. Ranchers have seen the glowing discs put beams down. Ranchers have seen animals rise into these glowing discs. The glowing discs have been seen lowering animals down in beams of light to pastures where they are then mutilated. And to get those people, law enforcement or ranchers, to stand up in front of a camera and tell the world what they've seen with their own eyes is the biggest difficulty of my entire career, because we are on a planet where humans are more afraid of humans and their ridicule than they are of extraterrestrials. I am hoping that in this citizen hearing, a kind of exercise to what I hope will take place. All of this should be presented in a formal, executive, official, congressional hearing of why has the agencies of the United States government, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, the NRO, they've all been studying this. They have more data than I do. Why shouldn't this country get back on the track of being of and by and for the people? And that we should know exactly what those agencies know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your fine testimony. I'd like to yield to my colleague from the House, Mr. Bartlett. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you all very much for your testimony. Mr. Heseltine, you mentioned some concern expressed to you about the contribution of statistics.
Yes.
It reminded me when I was working on my doctorate, and that was a long time ago. I got it in 1952. I came in one morning and my major professor, Norman Phillips, said, "You know, Roscoe, there are 3 degrees of liars." I said, "Sir?" He said, "Yes, there are liars, there are damn liars, and there are statisticians." So that was his view of the problem. When I got home last night, my wife called me and she said, "There's somebody on the phone with a very heavy accent that wants to talk to you." So I went to the phone and it was somebody from the BBC. And they said, "We understand that you're involved in a citizens' hearing in Washington, D.C. about extraterrestrials." And I said, "Well, that's not quite my perception when I accepted the invitation to come to be a part of this citizen hearing." And I thought to myself, this is a bit like the elephant and the 3 blind men. One of them felt its broadside and said, "Gee, this is a wall." Another felt one of the legs and said, "This has to be a tree." And another felt the tail and said, "This is a rope or a vine." And so what you think these hearings are about depends, I guess, upon your context and of your experience and what you had in your head when you came here. I knew before I came here that UFOs were a real subject. Unidentified flying objects. Even the Air Force, in their not very truthful fact sheet on closing down Project Blue Book, admitted that there were 701 unidentified. That's what a UFO is, an unidentified flying object. So even the Air Force admits that they're unidentified flying objects. My interview on the BBC last evening ended with my question: what are they? There's clearly something out there that cannot be explained as beams of light or swamp gas or hallucinations or anything. more than one person sees it from different angles when there is a radar track. This is real. This is not something that you can argue away. My hope is, as a result of this hearing, that the media will, even if they believe that this is all crazy, that everyone who believes in, now I believe in UFOs. I'm not quite there yet that they're extraterrestrial. Maybe that's because I'm a scientist, and I know that the closest possible place I'm told where there could be life is 37 light years away. What that means is, unless they have some way of communicating faster than the speed of light, it takes 74 years to ask a question and get an answer back. So obviously you can't be controlling something from that far away. Now, my forebears, not very long ago, since I am Anglo-Saxon, my forebears not very long ago were running around Europe in animal skins in a stone age. So I have to be pretty arrogant and presumptuous to believe that there isn't somewhere out there in this huge universe some civilization more developed than mine. And I note that we still have these stupid wars and kill each other. And there's got to be a civilization somewhere in this huge universe with 1 billion stars in our galaxy and 1 billion galaxies out there. There's the statistical probability that there is life somewhere else just has to be very, very high, doesn't it? I would hope that what comes of this hearing is that the press recognizes that here is an opportunity for some really interesting stories. There is reporting out there, and then after the reporting, what is the explanation of it? I'm sure the Air Force thought that they could explain away nearly 12,000 or 12,618 sightings. They explained away all but 701 of them. And there are a lot of sightings that, that are searchlights on clouds and that sort of thing. And so it would make very interesting press, I would think, to report these sightings and then to report the analysis of the sighting. What did it mean? So the press doesn't have to buy in to extraterrestrials. They don't have to buy into to any of this. They simply need to do what the press, I think, is supposed to do, and that is report what's out there. And why wouldn't this make, and they don't have to buy into the lunatic fringe. If somebody cites something, somebody cites something. Why not report it? They don't even report the sighting. They don't report anything. You've told me about fairly recent sightings. Mr. Davenport, I haven't heard any of that in the press. Now, a number of years ago, there were mentions of that in the press. I mentioned the one time I was listening, I can't remember the year, it was quite some time ago, but you may be able to tell me what the year was by the confluence of the two events. One was sightings over New Mexico, and the other was a report that 2 people had died in New York City from what might have been psittacosis, and if it was psittacosis, it might have come from dried pigeon manure, so maybe we ought to kill all the pigeons in New York City. So I thought to myself, with that kind of logic, if I was out there from somewhere else watching us, I think I'd want to watch a little longer before I contacted these people. I hope that that's what comes of this. As I say, there are unidentified flying objects. I came here with an open mind. I'm not quite there yet that they're extraterrestrial because I'm not sure how they would control things when the closest possible life, I'm told, is 37 light years away. Now, I couldn't imagine, my forebears couldn't imagine the iPhones of today. So clearly there may be travel faster than the speed of light. There may be ways to communicate that we can't begin to understand. But, the phenomenon is real. They are here. There are thousands of reportings. And I will do everything I can. I think I have some credibility. I will try to do everything I can to convince the press that there's some interesting stories here. The story may be, this guy's really a wacko, isn't he? He's reporting these crazy things. But in any event, isn't there an interesting story to all of these sightings? There is something there. Why? Who has been successful in convincing the press that these are not reportable? It's supposed to be a free press, free country. The truth out there. Why isn't it? Thank you very much.
it's turning into a Senate hearing, you know, where we give our views. And of course, I'm guilty of that for the last 2 days. The next person to ask questions is Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey.
Thank you. More interesting information. There's no question about it. I'd like to just add on to what Congressman Bartlett said. It's not just the press that needs to start bringing this forward. It's our government, and we know that. Maybe if our government will listen and investigate, I mean, they're doing it somewhere probably, but if they'd bring it out in the open, that would make interesting press, and it would not be press libeled kooks, I don't believe. And I actually have questions, but I want to say there's no kooks in this room, and I am so impressed with all of you, so thank you for letting me be part of it. Okay, Peter Davenport, you said that there's over 80,000 written reports that and examples that you get. I mean, reports you get every year on your hotline and in your organization?
We receive probably between 3,000 and 6,000 reports a year. We have, I think, 86,000 reports accumulated in our database.
Okay, well, give us an example or two of what somebody would call about that actually resulted in incredible action.
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman Woolsey. I would go right to the Phoenix Lights case in response to your question. The most dramatic case that I've handled in my roughly 50, 60 years of investigating the UFO phenomenon. Again, the size of the objects was unimaginable by terrestrial standards. The triangular object that hovered for an estimated 5 minutes over the intersection of 7th Avenue and Indian School Road that night, again, this is March 13th, 1997, hovered there for 5 minutes. It subtended an arc of about 135 degrees from the vantage point of people on the ground. It was that large above their heads, at which time it was not less than 8,000 feet above ground level. The size of these objects by itself tells us that we're dealing with something extraordinary. That object was capable of hovering motionless for 5 minutes.
I'm going to ask you to talk about what came of that. I mean, so you discovered, you heard something and it turned out to be something that people could see, and what came of it? I mean, so why did it matter that we knew this?
Well, it appears that a very unusual event occurred. It's generated multiple books, 6 videotapes of various objects that night were taken. It was an extraordinary event that went largely unreported in the national press. It occurred on March 13th. The first national article in the USA Today did not appear until Wednesday, the 18th of June that year.
Was anybody harmed? Did anything happen to Arizona because of this?
Not that I'm aware of. I think the full story is yet to be understood, and I'm not sure we'll be able to obtain the full story, but about 1,500 witnesses submitted written reports. That's pretty good evidence by my standard.
What did you do with those reports? Where did they go?
Many of them are on our webpage. I think probably 100 or 150 eyewitness reports are posted there. Many of them are in the hands of investigators in Arizona.
Okay, thank you. And are you still following up? I mean, you don't just hand it to the investigators and say, now it's yours.
Well, that is what I did in that instance, because the National UFO Reporting Center, technically speaking, is not an investigative body.
Right.
We're a conduit of information.
Okay, now to all of you, but you don't all have to answer if you hear the right answer from one of your colleagues on the panel. When it's not a UFO, okay, this flying object, when it's not a UFO, what is it?
I'll take that first. Any number of things, Congresswoman. In fact, most of us who try to do good work in this field approach it with surprising skepticism, because we no longer have the luxury of disbelief, so to say. It's been proved to us repeatedly in terms you could bring into a courtroom. We have to be particularly careful about not informing our examination. First, it's no secret that our government has produced flying aircraft that do not conform to the notions that we grew up with, that are terribly advanced. And I don't have to tell the members of this committee that technologically, where we are at the highest levels.
So now, and it's your understanding that those technologies aren't common knowledge?
Oh, I think they're common knowledge in popular culture, but the specifics of the dynamics of these machines and what they're capable of, for most intelligent people would mimic a machine from, another planet or something. Also, if you're predisposed to the subject, or you're a believer, or you're looking for these things, it can be a plane coming at a certain angle. It can, under certain circumstances, be a reflection from the ground. It can be, a large assembly of balloons themselves that escape. There are any number of possibilities. Mm-hmm. The main thing is, to paraphrase our friend and colleague Stanton Friedman, the question is not, are UFOs per se machines of advanced technology from parts unknown? The question is, has one ever been? And for those of us that spend a good part of our lives looking into these questions, that answer is overwhelmingly yes.
And we feel pretty certain that the UFOs, and if they're manned or bodied, I don't know what's in them, if there is such a thing, they are coming here they aren't coming to get our technology. They're coming with advanced technology. They're that far ahead of us.
I don't think any of us assume these things run on coal, petroleum, or...
yeah, right. Okay.
What it is all theoretical.
Okay.
I have been involved in this field of study for over 35 years, and I know that I have no idea of where they come from, why they're coming, how they propel themselves. Mm-hmm. I can make better educated guesses than many people, and I tend to shy away from colleagues who do tell me that they know the specific answers. For me, that is somewhat problematical, to say that you know the unknown definitively. There's only several ways you can. They told you. You read it in a book, you saw it in a movie, you dreamt it, it came to you in a vision. However, my feeling is we are dealing with an area that is the epitome of the unknown, and we have to
I have one more question, and I have to ask it of Linda because I only have a minute. Ms. Moulton-Howe, explain a little bit further. I don't understand how these pieces and parts, tissues are used. Why?
A genetic harvest.
Pardon?
It's a genetic harvest.
To be used how? I'm not there yet. I don't get it. What are they doing with it? They're going to take it back to outer space and do something. What are they doing with it?
I think that the answer is very complicated. I think it involves, on a more sophisticated level, what we are beginning to do in our science with cloning. Mm-hmm. And if you are advanced and you can take genetic material and you can clone, you can probably clone anything.
So there's a chance, there's maybe the idea that we have parts of animals, parts of living animals that the aliens would like to clone because they're maybe stronger than what they have, or why do they want ours?
I don't have all the answers, but a harvest of tissue, there might be a reason for why specific pieces and tissues are harvested, not because anything is being done with the bovine itself. It's the genetic DNA. It's the DNA that would be used.
So it's not a religious sacrament, or it's not symbolic?
We're talking about medical cloning.
Could I just put
Yes.
in there to back up Linda there? I think we have to put things in perspective, and it goes back to addressing the question, your last question. Realistically, every UFO researcher in the world will say of 100% of cases, 95% of them turn out to have a mundane explanation. That's a generally accepted figure worldwide. Have a mundane, whether it be astronomical, misinterpretation, that's a generally accepted figure. But really, where we start to delve down is when we look at the 5%. Well, when you look at the 5% after investigation, you end up with probably about 3% of hardcore cases. Now, these are hardcore cases after investigation. Well, I aren't bothered about the 97%. And your remit here is not really to speculate, in my opinion, as to where and what they're doing. It's really to establish the facts. And the facts are very, very apparent from very credible people that we are demonstrating that this is a subject that needs to be addressed as on an evidential basis. And it's not for us to speculate really where they're coming from, what their agenda is. It's really to look at the evidence. This is a hearing to look at evidence, and this is what we should be doing. And the evidence in that 3% is what counts. And the media really need to look at the 3%, the cases that defy all explanation after investigation. That's what evidence is. Is there evidence that would stand up in a court of law? Yes, there is. If there was a plane crash scenario just outside this building and we all happened to be on a coffee break, we'd all be material witnesses to it. However, when we talk about UFOs, the media suddenly make us all crazy. And that is wrong, and this needs to be addressed. And the panel in front of me are the representatives that can help make that happen. We are relying on you to use your voice and experience to listen to the evidence. And that's all any UFO investigator wants. All we want is a level playing field. That is not a lot to ask in the world. We just want to present evidence.
But, sir, are you suggesting we listen and don't ask questions?
No, of course not. But in the limited time frame that we have,
I mean,
we
we're
have
not
only
experts
so
up
little
here.
time.
If we don't ask the mundane, simple question that
Absolutely.
the public is asking, you aren't going to get anything out of this panel.
No, I accept that, but we're here to look at evidence.
Thank you.
But the evidence goes to implication, and that's what you're asking about. And the implication of all of this is most of the world is probably at the stage of pretty lights in the sky that form patterns or can be stationary and put beams down. And what I just presented to you in a brief way was just a tiny, tiny scratch on the surface of 33 years of my trying to understand animal mutilations and why, which goes out to 1,000 other branches.
Okay.
If the pretty lights in the sky and the beams for centuries have been involved with harvesting material from this earth, I don't know that there's any Homo sapien who can answer why. But there is no question in my mind or anybody who has investigated that we're dealing with advanced intelligences, with advanced technology that can fold space-time, sir. That's how it's faster than the speed of light. And that in so doing, that their focus is on what we as Homo sapiens have only begun to investigate, and that is the DNA, the genetic material, and that we're now finally doing experiments in the subject of cloning. It's a bottom line that what is happening on this planet, and it has for centuries, is there is a harvest of genetic material, plants, animals, and humans. Why and to what end is a very complicated story. And I think that what I had just realized, and you're asking me the question which goes to implication, is that the disconnect between the current world population of 7 billion and what is actually happening on this planet in relationship to other intelligences, the gap is so great that to address the details that are known and what our government knows is so difficult that right now the inertia of silence on the part of government agencies who have a great deal of information, let me guarantee you, that they feel that this is a subject that cannot be presented. And I do know that there was a high-ranking naval officer who told one of his lower-ranking officers who had seen a craft who was exposed to the photographs from Roswell of the bodies. The high-ranking authority, when asked by the low-ranking authority who had seen the craft, and asked the higher-ranking, when are you going to tell the people? And the answer was never. And the implication there, politically, is that we are now in the United States of America, where there is an unstated policy of total, complete silence for the foreseeable future because it is too difficult to change what has been known to something that might upend a lot of subjects.
Thank you. I'd like to turn now to Congressman Carolyn Kilpatrick, please.
That would be Congresswoman, sir?
Congresswoman,
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm easily corrected.
Thank you. Not to correct you, just woman here. I certainly want to appreciate and thank you all for coming again. Every day is a different day. This is the first day of the rest of all of our lives. How we use it, how we put it together, how we share and give back is what we're here for. So I commend you for your testimony. A lot of notes, a lot of work, and my mind is boggled. I think I want to ask you first, Mr. Heseltine, Royal Air Force, security, police, hundreds of incidents yet today. What is the position of the British government on UFOs? And is it similar to U.S., who are cousins, or is it something different, or do we do this in British? Do they speak? Tell me, what's the position there?
The bottom line is that there is the special relationship with America, and America is quite clearly the most secretive government in the world on UFOs. And it leads, their fingers are in every decent UFO report around the world.
I want to know about Britain. We know pretty
Okay,
much about
well,
America.
Britain follows generally America's lead on most things, and Britain does the same. They have been releasing over the last 3.5 years several batches of files, which are in terms of papers, hundreds of thousands of single sheets of paper. However, the majority of the paper that has been released is very low level. It's mostly correspondence. In amongst that, there are some very good cases. For example, a British case in 1957, Milton Torres, a pilot, US pilot, flying over Ipswich in Suffolk, England, and he was stationed there flying a Super Sabre. He was vectored towards a radar target, and he was ordered to fire his missile at the target. He actually got the launch codes. When he went to launch, it jammed.
Okay, stop.
Okay, in Britain.
Stop. Yeah. You don't give me cases. We got cases.
Okay.
I want to know what's happening in Britain. I want to know what's happening with
Britain
the military.
is very
I want to know what's happening
lame.
with the government.
The media is very similar as to the US in not reporting. It belittles the subject, and it's criminal. And there is very little or no difference in the UK to the US.
This is a world phenomenon that we're discussing.
Absolutely.
You all know it way better than we do.
Absolutely.
We've heard testimony now 3 days and read a month leading up to this, videos and all. Ms. Howe.
Yes.
And it's really for all of you. And I think you ended your presentation on something like this. What and why is such a profound reality
Yes.
not being built upon, internalized. If I have my military who comes to me and tells me they've got data, experiences, and other kinds of things that this is real, other countries, I've been on elevator and in the hotels with others from Chile and Peru and everywhere else in the world, or many places in the world. When we already acknowledge that whatever it is more significant than what we have here, and obviously in Britain and some of the other countries. The why of it. Your scientific data is outstanding. See, I think the answer is probably in a coalition of nations and not in our governments, obviously, because the governments know something we don't know and they aren't sharing it, and it could be critical and catastrophic for the human being.
Well, let me add a postscript to yesterday's presentation on Bentwaters. It's a major case. It involved dozens of military people on a very important base. I, for one, at least, have been exposed to information from two people that within 24 hours of the Jim Peniston, John Burroughs, and Ed Kovansak encounter with the black, glassy craft with the hieroglyphic symbols on it in the forest, that within 24 hours in the UK, the National Security Agency of the United States took over everything that was happening at Bentwaters.
They testified to that.
This is important because it means that within 24 hours, a decision had been made somewhere at some level between the United States and the UK that the United States would take precedent through the National Security Agency.
Okay, stop. We heard that. No, I'm not good. I don't know the scientific part of it. I'm just going to tell you the political and what we do and what things we know about our country and the world and our relationships with various countries of the world. You got to teach us something else.
Well,
wait, let me just finish my point, because don't give me that testimony we had yesterday. We all heard it, we got notes, and we got to read it and embellish it. I want to move it to the action phase. You came here to ask us to do something, and we got to know how, what, and why. Haven't got there yet, and maybe by Friday or next month, or as we move this over the next couple of years, we'll get closer than you've got in 30 years, and you're to be commended. What you have unveiled is something is there, that we're not alone. I'm still learning. I want to learn more about that, in fact. But as I learn it, the existence as we know it is being jeopardized. It may not exist next week, let alone 30 more years.
I was only going to your point about international versus the United States. It's my impression that the United States, for some reason politically, is carrying the weight of the disclosure. I don't know why, because other countries have bodies, have craft, have photographs, have physical evidence. But the United States, going back to World War II and decisions that were made, for some reason, it is this country that seems to have the pivotal weight in
What do you think that is?
Disclosure.
What do you think that is? U.S. is the, if it's not for real, it's perceived to be the power of the world.
And that's exactly the reason why.
And right. So we sit here in the power of the world,
But it's
with
loss
the
of
power
power.
not of this world, or we don't know how it is.
Do you think America wants to
Hold
lose
it, sir.
that power?
Hold it. Hold. You can't interrupt a congressperson. I will yield to you in a moment, though. I will, because I just want to. We want to get to what we need to get to, really, and how we get to make it something so that we can all live another 100 years, or thereabouts. So I'm going to yield to you, Mr. Heseltine, in just a second, and you too. I don't want to. I'm just getting antsy up here. Today, you all took it to. Every day, it's another level. Woo, woo. But I hate how we trivialize this situation.
Exactly.
I hate the men with the horns and all that, and what my colleague read yesterday. That's been since day one. And I'm telling you, what we know, it's so profound.
Yes.
And so big and so real. When you don't know how to deal with it, you trivialize it. So when people think that we're coming, you all have been commending us, we've all taken a lot of flack and we're proud of it. We're servants of the people. But to come here and then hear this other crap, in my home paper as well, I don't even talk to them. Because you can't say conspiracy if you're a congresswoman, because they really think you're wacko. But there's something out here that's been coordinated from our leadership, not the president person, but the office, and our military and our press. That's a national conglomeration that continues. And unless we can somehow step outside of that and build some kind of coalitions and work and pray and build and speak and teach, we're going to lose. And what will the world be? It might be those things they've been drawn for all of my life. I yield to Mr. Heseltine the rest of my time. Sir.
Thank you. May I make a suggestion? You all, I witnessed on Monday what I thought it was an historic moment at the end when you were concluding, summing up the first day, where you all said, no, we should have congressional hearings. Now, for a ufologist, that's an amazing thing for you to say, and I appreciate that tremendously, but I think what I need you to do, realistically, as people with over 80 years experience, is to say that to NBC, CNN. So ring up your colleagues at 6 o'clock today and say, I'm calling a press conference collectively where all 6 of you say, we believe in you.
Point. Do you think that the press listens? We talk to the press for 10 minutes, 30 minutes. They take the 10 seconds that they want.
I know
That's
what
why
we're
it's got to be
battling
a
with.
people-to-people thing. It's not going to be from the press.
I know
It's
that,
not.
but we battle the press, and that is the principal reason why nobody knows this
We're
subject.
in a press club. Have you seen an article in any of this post?
Precisely, but why aren't they here?
They're here. They are.
Can I just add momentarily onto my colleague's thoughts? It's not so much that you're saying something on the record about your reevaluation of this subject based on the knowledge that you're acquiring here and in your readings. It's the cumulative effect of all of you and the people now serving in your positions that will make the change. But it must begin somewhere with people taking a stand like your good selves.
We believe it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to call on Congresswoman Darlene Hooley. Congresswoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, all of you, for your testimony. It's been terrific. When did we start sort of this whole ridicule piece? Yes.
May I take that?
Yes, Peter?
It has become a research specialty of mine, and it begins literally the summer of 1947. For me, I began questioning this over 20 years ago. How is it that my saying to you, Congresswoman, I saw something in the sky the other day or the other night that I couldn't recognize, or did something that I had never seen, case closed. Why is it that in terms of 66 years of Western journalism, popular culture, attitudes and ideas about flying saucers and little green men, that you hear me make a simple observation and you're wired to think, gee, I didn't know Peter had mental problems, or maybe he's kind of gone mystical, or he wants to feel special, or he wants to perpetrate a hoax, or he wants to be on the Oprah show, or. In the words of the late Dr. Wilhelm Reich, evasion of the obvious. Why is it? How did that happen? It wasn't an accident. I spent years studying that first wave of media. I'm the only person you've ever met that has downloaded and read in order every single article the New York Times has ever published on the subject of UFOs, extraterrestrials, flying discs, etc., in order, repeatedly looking for a pattern of reportage. And it begins the week after the Roswell incident. The Times didn't even deem it worthwhile to make that first report when it was reported that a machine of undetermined origin had crashed outside of this town in New Mexico. They waited until the cover story had gone into effect. And I would say, as a non-statistician, 98% of the New York Times coverage, and I stress here that in 1947, even more than now, the New York Times was the flagship of Western journalism. It still is in print terms. The influence the Times exerted over the other news syndicates was marked. The Copley Syndicate, Hearst papers, all of the major American papers followed the Times lead as a rule. And the Times hit the floor with all four wheels spinning. Every coverage, and I will be happy to send you an unpublished paper on this if you're curious, anybody on the committee, was sarcastic, condescending, ridiculing, explaining away like a parent to a bad child, almost immediately they start to trot out authorities, often unnamed, often very contemptuous of the subject because overwhelmingly they're astronomers and psychologists. You would actually laugh if you read some of these articles. They're breathtaking in their ignorance and pseudo-science. Now, what I did was I overlaid on that timeline of these articles several hundred authentic, fully vetted, declassified documents from every agency you can imagine. And I would say it's about a 95% rate as you go through these, where you see these silly headlines and phenomenally goofy excuses, and then you see Air Force starting in September of '47, Air Force intelligence, Army intelligence, CIA, etc. We are concerned. These are not Soviet. They may be extraterrestrials. By the way, 2 words at the time in 1947.
Okay.
And so on. And what happened was, it was drummed into the minds of editors, reporters, that this is the way this thing is reported. Now, again, I stress these are the nationals. The locals, as Peter said, have almost always had an inquiring mind and acted independently, actually searching for information. I cannot prove, I couldn't offer you a shred of real evidence of why I think this is and how it happened, but deductive reasoning, a lot of study, and common sense suggests to me that a number of key individuals in the Truman administration, either with the understanding of the president or not to preserve plausible deniability, either with the coordination of the study group that had formed around the president in 1947, or not, went to New York, to Boston, to Los Angeles, to meet with people like David Sarnoff of NBC, the owners of the Times, the Hearst people. And one of several things passed. They basically said, we're a little concerned based on that old bugaboo of Orson Welles in 1938, mass panic. You know, everybody's worried about the Russians right now. The president would consider it a personal favor if you'd kind of toe the line on this and just treat it not seriously. Or, in some cases, possibly saying, because these were major players, these folks were power brokers and among the most influential people in the country at the time, that we need your assistance. It's your patriotic duty. Now, once that pattern was set into place, what reporter that picks up on the reality of this and wants to do a serious piece of reportage is going to risk their career? We all know it's a joke. Now, to a great degree, that pattern is still stuck in the major media. It is changing, but that, I believe, is how it began.
And one of...
Thank you. I think I have 1 minute left. Anyone that would like to tackle this question.
We've got a problem time-wise, a
Okay.
serious problem
All
time-wise.
right. I yield back my 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I would ask my colleague.
I hope you make that up somewhere.
Yes, oh yeah. You know where we're going to make it up? We're not going to eat today. If we keep it up, we're going to have the food of knowledge, but not much more.
Can I make just...
I'd like to ask my colleague if he could restrict his time. I'm going to wipe my time out because we've been liberal in letting the witnesses express themselves, and that's, of course, why we're here, for you to express yourself. But here too, since this doesn't work, maybe this works. When you see me doing that wind it down intelligently. Thank you.
Can I make just a brief close to what he was saying? And that is that 1 year after the July 47 crashes, there was another one in Aztec, New Mexico, in March of 1948. And the editor of the Farmington newspaper at the time did receive, from all that we have been able to learn, did receive a request by somebody in the Pentagon to not report about what had happened, that there was distinct pressure put on to a local editor. And I believe that that is the way that the Defense Department and local media there began, that was shortly after World War II. And so the population was less, and the local media were much, much more inclined to take some requests by the Pentagon.
Thank you. I now yield to Congressman Mike Cook, Merrill Cook, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Peter Davenport, you indicated you received about 86,000 incidents, I guess, over the years, about 3,000 to 5,000 a year. Your list here of 62, and I appreciate that you went back to 1936 on the first one, and I noticed that probably 55 or more recent, probably in the last 15 or 16 years. I take it this might be a top 62 hit list or something of incidents that you think? I mean, and so what I'm really asking is, what was the standard that you used for including these, and they are certainly interesting, events and sightings?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Cook. There were several criteria: the drama involved with the sighting, the degree of corroboration, the degree of verification. But in essence, I drew up that list as a distillation from the 86,000 cases for the committee's benefit to show you some of the more dramatic, well-founded cases that we have in our database.
And you, like others that have studied this, would probably say that a high percentage of the 86,000 that you've received are probably not credible. I mean, it doesn't take a very high percentage to make a really important case here. So
Correct.
I'm trying to get a sense of what you think would be a credible percentage of all those numbers.
It's very difficult to quantify that. I've attempted to do it, but the difficulty is, it is very difficult to know for sure, with 100% accuracy, what is a genuine UFO sighting and what is not.
Well, I think you've put together some very good work on sightings of UFOs. So I'm going to jump to the next thing. And until I saw the last statement, I was sort of accepting this, but I have to say, and it's not too different than the concern that I think Congressman Bartlett expressed earlier. You said here at the back, without indicating ET aspects of these sightings. Now, maybe there are some that you just didn't include in this list, but it's a fact that we have, that this is ET, that ET is real. And I'm just asking you, how, well, let me ask you this. Isn't it a leap to say, okay, UFOs exist, as Dr. Bartlett has indicated, and then saying it's ET? I mean, aren't there other explanations for UFOs? Are there no other explanations? Is it the only explanation? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Probably not the only explanation. I have to say that because we don't have a definitive answer yet to what we're dealing with. But it is difficult for me to imagine that some of the craft and some of the circumstances that are reported to our center are of terrestrial origin, just given the flight characteristics of many of the craft reported to us.
In other words, probably in these 62 cases, you would say it's the best explanation. Is that what you're saying? And is that why they get included on the list, is if you think it's the best explanation for ET? Or you're just saying, hey, there was credibility, we don't know what it was yet, but clearly they saw something. It's very strange. I mean, you have some ET index that you're applying to this list, I take it, or you wouldn't have said that at the end?
Yeah, I would not have included those cases in that list had they not been of extreme interest to me. I am a scientist, trained in that capacity, and I would not have included those cases in that list had they not had associated with them good, solid, hard, objective
And as part of your scientific training, you are saying here that it's still a leap between the belief in a UFO and knowing, without a doubt, that it's ET.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say
you
more.
Said yes?
I would
well, you
say
said
more.
Yup, but I want to make sure I hear this correct. And really, I want you to say what you truthfully believe and think based on your experience. Clearly, you've had a lot of time to think about this a lot, and you are obviously an impressively trained scientist.
I would characterize it not so
all
much,
that.
not so much as a leap as a step. in that direction. And if these craft are not of extraterrestrial origin, I have no explanation for them. Craft that can hover motionless for 5 minutes above Phoenix, craft that can accelerate at a rate so fast that it's reported from multiple witnesses their eyes could not follow the craft as it departed.
I understand the maneuvering that you're saying, and it's certainly the best, maybe, in your mind, best explanation. I'd like to go to Gary Heseltine. I have to say that I'm particularly impressed with your list of sightings. And the reason I'm impressed is because they're from policemen. Every one of this is a pretty thick list, a lot of them. So I imagine the credibility on your list you would rank as certainly higher than what many people that collect data would indicate, or just, I don't want to put any words in your mouth. So.
No, you've actually highlighted something that I hope to be able to answer. And I think the real answer is that when I said to you before that the accepted figure is 3% after investigation, well, that's not really the end of it, because I would argue that in the high caliber witness categories, high caliber I would mean astronauts, cosmonauts, pilots, military and commercial, radar operators, sonar operators. In these very high caliber witness categories, the percentage after investigation would be much, much higher than that 3%.
Well,
I would hazard a guess that if you looked at military pilots with millions of dollars spent on their training, the percentage of error would be much reduced, and I would hazard a guess that it would be something in the region of 80% plus were accurate.
Okay, then I'm going to quickly ask you, well, I'm not going to ask you because I only have a minute left, but I'm going to say certainly credibility of people like Captain Solace, who's sitting here in the front row.
Absolutely. I mean,
that
the
probably
man is
caused the United States Air Force to come up with filters over their ICBM silos is certainly going to be a credible.
Well, I think that's where we need to look at when we look at collective evidence.
I'm sorry to cut you, but I know that we're trying. I'm going to ask Ms. Howe. Very interesting slides, very interesting. Nevada Proving Ground, Dugway, Utah. I'm from Utah. Talk about secrets. Let's talk about nuclear testing secrets. Yeah. Couldn't nuclear testing have a lot to do with these animal carcasses and the bloodless? Isn't that a...
Our first test was in July of 1945. There are mutilation records going back, as I said, to 1911.
Okay, good answer. Let me ask you this, though. The one thing that maybe I scratched my head on a little bit, your statement. Well, I scratched my head on a lot, I'll have to say that. That it absolutely is evidence of genetic harvesting. I mean, that may be your belief. That may be something that you say there's...
No, it's not.
Are you saying there's no possibility it could be anything but genetic harvesting, what these slides are showing?
We're not in the context of belief here at all. We're in the context of hard physical evidence, medical evidence.
But how that carcass ended up the way it was is what I'm asking. That has to be... You're saying that's proof? Absolute 100% proof? To the extent that the law of gravity is pretty much proven.
The next,
genetic harvesting.
The next round of the hearing is documents, and there have been leaked documents from inside our own government in which the phrase extraterrestrial biological entities, with the acronym all caps EBES, has been included since at least a printing of what I think is a document that none of us have found any dispute over, the Psalm 101 document with a 1954 War Office stamp on it. And if our government, going back to FDR, which there are also leaked documents about the discussion between FDR and the Secretary of War, Marshall, after the February 1942 made the front page of the Los Angeles Times, the photograph of our artillery and beams going up to a diamond-shaped object, distributing some 1,417 bullets, and then having that discussed in documents by Franklin Delano Roosevelt with the Secretary of War, and that in those documents that have been leaked, it uses the terms, these were interplanetary, celestial, and that we were retrieving these craft because we wanted to examine them. That puts a context here, again, that would be before the war.
Well, I appreciate your telling me that. That's interesting to me. But you don't allow any of the wiggle room that, for example, Mr. Davenport seems to allow in terms of final conclusions. And that's certainly your right, because you've looked at these things a lot more than I have. I want to get the best information I can, as credibly put together as I can, to help, as I said, break down the truth embargo. That's what we need to do first. And maybe we have to do it a brick at a time. Okay.